the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Nissen, and today I am lucky enough to have with me Stasha Boyd. Stasha, why don't you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yes, my name is Stasha Boyd, and I write. I am the primary writer and creative director for Q Media Productions. My company, we create mobile media tour content for museums, galleries, state parks, national parks, things of that nature. Our tagline is "Stories You Take With You." Because what we write for, our programs are, if you've ever gone to a museum and taken an audio tour, essentially that story travels with the person as they move through the space. But more importantly, we write in such a way that the story stays in the heart of the visitor long after they leave. So that's our primary rule and function.
Stasha, that is so fun. I can't imagine all the opportunities you get. How do you actually get the stories? So a museum comes to you and says, we really want to update our audio tours. Do you need to do all the research to figure out stories that stay with you? Or do you sit down with people and interview them? How does that work?
Well, part of it, it's really a development process. So normally by the time we've arrived on the scene, we've already been talking with the client for quite some time. So we have a little bit of an understanding of what they're trying to achieve, of what their interpretive goals are, what their operational goals are. Sometimes museums are trying to physically get people to move through a space in a certain order or at a certain speed. Other times they want them to just be very leisurely or to have a choose your own pathway kind of experience. And those two things kind of depend upon how we get or impact how we get to tell the story. But at that point, what we do is we have a development process, and it starts with that first conversation where you're really sitting down with the core team. So the Q Media team arrives and their team is all there at the table. And we do 2 days of really intense development. And we start with what we call the emotional goal. And the emotional goal is whenever a visitor is leaving this place, this location, this experience, you, client, want them to walk away feeling what about your space? What do you want them to feel? Because part of the challenge is a lot of times people are, they think they know what they want. They want to tell facts recited in order. They want to tell about the event, but understanding storytelling is a very different thing. So we start with that. It's what do they want them to feel? And then from that point, then we go through content by content, point by point, piece by piece, whatever we have, and say, okay, what is the story here that is going to most effectively deliver that emotional goal? So, for example, we do a lot of work with Holocaust museums, and every tour has been different because every museum and every team has been different. In some cases, what the client really wanted a very clear never again. They're a never again place. Another one, their emotional goal may have been they wanted people to walk away with a sense of connection to the survivors and to the overcomers and to the upstanders of the Holocaust. Now, when you look at the content that you have to work with, the pictures are the same, the research is the same, the facts are the same. That is what it is. But when you're writing those stories, those are two totally different approaches to the stories about each individual event. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. It happens certainly when we're writing novels and short stories or creative nonfiction. Right. We have that emotional goal that we want our audience to experience. And if we don't keep that in the forefront of what we're doing, we will lose our audience. And so I always advocate that writing is always about the audience.
Right.
Sometimes it's a catharsis for ourselves, but if you want to share something, it is for the audience, and it's actually about the audience and their interpretation. So we birth the words, and then they take the words on their own, and that's the experience that they have with it.
And what we I try to explain it to various people, that to think of it as genre. It's like emotional goal is just really another way of saying genre. It's like, I happen to like thrillers and murder mysteries. I am not a big fan of chick lit. Those two things are two different emotional experiences when you're reading them. They're also two different emotional presentations when you're writing them. I happen to really like biographical histories of historical figures. Not really a big fan of a lot of memoir, but for the same reason, it's because those are emotional states that I like to enjoy when I'm reading. Same thing with films and television. I always say it's like, the movie Saw, is that a good picture or a bad picture? And it's like, depends on whether or not you like that genre. If you like it, it's a great picture. If you don't like it, oh my God. But that's kind of that feeling when it comes to writing. And whether you're writing for something that you're going to experience in your head or something that you're going to experience on the screen, you have to, if you're making a promise to that experiencer. I promise I'm going to deliver the emotional goal that you want. I promise. And if you write a thriller and people aren't thrilled, well, then you let them down.
If you're trying to make that emotional connection with a listener,
yeah,
is there a different set of rules or standards when it's audio only versus when you're trying to write a novel?
Very much, yeah. And I think the thing is, like, and it's even different within the audio itself. So when you're writing for in audio, in mobile media tours, and what we do, it is the only type of writing where your listener or your experiencer is actually standing in the scene or in front of the thing. So, for example, if we've done projects at Kennedy Space Center, and you're standing right there in front of the Atlantis space shuttle. And so as you're telling that story, they're looking at the actual object. They're an arm's stretch away from this idea, this thing. When you're writing a book about that, it's all taking place in the head and in the mind. It's same thing with the film. It's like you can see it, but it's all taking place within a screen. So when you're writing for something within an audio program, there's writing for people who are going to be experiencing it in a way, the same way they experience radio, versus somebody who's going to be experiencing it in the same way they experience a personal tour with somebody standing right next to them. So, for example, I love podcasts. I'm a huge podcast fan, but I listen to those while I'm cleaning the house or going for walks or driving in my car, et cetera, et cetera. I also like documentaries, but I can't watch those while I'm, watching the cleaning or working or something like that. Same thing with the audio tours. You can't to experience them outside of the space weakens them. If you write them well. So, for example, we did a project for Kingsley Plantation in Jacksonville. And when you're standing at Kingsley Plantation, and this is a very important history of enslavement in the U.S. because it crossed Spanish to the United States, to the Civil War, back to the United States, and the laws changed under the feet of the people who were there. It's a fascinating story. But when you're standing there and you're listening to this, you don't know if somebody's going to be standing there in July or in December. But I know with 99% certainty that if they're standing in this particular spot, it's on the coast, they're going to feel the wind blow. So I can refer to that. And you could say, imagine it's a day just like today. And it doesn't matter what today is. If they're standing there, if they're in there in the summer, it's hot and sunny. If it's winter, it might be cold and gray. But now they're in the story, literally.
The experiential learning that goes with this is incredible. I totally envisioned standing there and feeling the wind, and I could imagine it raining. I could imagine it being hot. I could imagine it with a cold wind from the ocean.
Yeah.
And just standing there. I know I had the last audio tour I think I did was Pearl Harbor.
Okay. I know that. And
what's interesting about that is, all the stories, they had all the memorabilia. And as you go through from each piece, each picture, each
item, artifact, exhibit, everything. Yeah.
As you go from place to place, it weaves that story of the entire experience. So it starts with pre-bombing. And then we had the bombing, and then we had what happened afterwards, and World War II. It actually ventured off into that World War II before you come out on the other side. But I did really envision myself, as you said, that standing there, and it really makes it different. I know I did long time ago when the Titanic exhibit was going around the country. I did one of those, and you could touch the iceberg, touch the iceberg. Well, it's that experience. So while they're telling you about it and you're experiencing it at the same time, it really is very different. I can see how, as you're writing a novel and you need to describe it, it again changes. Which my next question is, an audio book, the descriptions are going to be really important for that.
Well, and actually to kind of pick up on it, there's like a little piece in between those two things. It's like, even within audio tours, I think I mentioned earlier, you'd have people who would want to go on a route and others where they want random access. When you're crafting an audio tour where somebody's taking a route, it's like they're going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4. In that case, you get to develop your audio tour the way you would develop a novel or a book. You start at the beginning and you can refer to things in chapter 7 that occurred in chapter 2, and you create this longer narrative story in an arc. Random access is actually more like an album. So random access, like say, for example, a person walks in and they have 150 pieces of art on the wall, but they've only got time to see maybe 6 or 7. And they have to have they wanted to walk away with that same emotional goal that we talked about before. Every piece is a super, super short story that has to deliver an emotional component of this overall emotional goal. So it's like picking up an album and you love it because you love this entire vibe that it brings. That's the same way that type of writing works. So you have novel and I'm blanking right now. What's the one where it's like all the short stories?
Anthology.
So basically you have like your novel style and you have your anthology style. So, but then you were talking about like the writing the novel. I'm sorry, I lost the question.
I don't know that it matters that you asked the question. It's a great conversation. You also do audio descriptions. What's the difference from audio descriptions versus the tours?
Okay, so audio description itself, what that is, audio description is essentially making the visual verbal. It's a very specific type of writing that is done to serve the blind and low vision community. So, for example, by its nature, visual arts, theater, film, television, etc., the visual component is key to the experience. But for a blind person who can't see what you're referencing, something has to fill in the gap in their knowledge. So like say, for example, if you're watching a film, and it's an action film, the person's always going, what just happened? What was that noise? What? Well, audio description tells them what happened. So, and actually it's like people want to like check it out. If you can go, Netflix, Prime, any of those right now, you can go on. And if you look at like languages, you can turn on audio description for almost any major film, thanks to a law that was passed back in 2010 and really it started being implemented in 2015. Major films, television, networks, etc., all have to create audio description program to serve the blind community. The same way they have to have captions for the deaf community. So the audio description, that style of writing, say, for example, in our case, where you go to a museum, a visitor can pick up a device. And again, there are 2 types of audio described tours. The first type is where you basically all you're doing is describing the events and the motion through the space. So the person gets their device, welcome to the Holocaust Museum, Houston. And then it describes what's happening, what's on the screen, what's in the exhibit, and then it'll read the panel text, and then it will describe the picture. And then it might say the next stop is located about 8 feet forward and to your left. So the person now, this person can navigate that space by themselves. They can have their own independent experience. And it's an incredibly valuable thing, because otherwise what happens to most people who are blind, if they do decide to go with a family member or a friend, that family member or friend is now spending their time as the unpaid assistant describing everything to the person. So they're not having their own experience. So that's one time. Another type is where you've created an interpretive tour, like we were talking about before, with that emotional goal. And then what you do is you take that interpretive tour and you basically create description that connects the dots in between what you've written. So if you're at Kennedy Space Center and you're referencing, it's like this on the interpretive tour, the size of the Atlantis exhibit, then a little break in the audio occurs and another voice comes in and says the Atlantis is so many feet long and so many feet wide and is suspended in the air at a certain height. The underside is black, the top side is white. The American flag is located in the front left corner. So now that person can visualize in their mind exactly what the person standing next to them is looking at.
This is fantastic. What a wonderful service that you have been able to provide for our people who are blind and with low vision.
Well, and right now, actually, what I'm working on today, the Orlando Fringe Festival, because right now there's no live audio description in basically any of our theaters here in Central Florida, which should be a scandal and an outrage. I think they're trying to get it added to Dr. Phillips, but the Fringe Festival really wants to take a lead on this. So I'm developing a training program for a team of volunteers, live audio describers, to be able to provide audio description for the Fringe Festival's plays. So a person who is blind or low vision can purchase their ticket the same way a person can go to see a show that has American Sign Language available to it. We are going to try to put an audio describer in all of the venues on those same nights. And so basically the way that works with live description is a person is certainly kind of sitting in the back of the house. They'll have a stenographer's mask or they might be up in the booth. And as the play is going on, they have a transmitter. The person who is blind or has low vision has a receiver and they're sitting in the audience, a little headset, and they'll hear the describer describing the action on the stage while the play is going on in real time.
We always need to be making sure we include everybody. And this is just really, it's really an exciting thing. Stasha, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I can be reached through our website. My company is Q Media Productions, and that's the letter Q, Media Productions with an S.com. And I'm Stasha at qmediaproductions.com. Stasha, Stasha. It looks like Stasha or Stasha, but it is Stasha. You can reach me there. You can also reach me just on our regular website. That's Solutions. That'll ring through to me as well. And those are probably the best two ways.
All right. Well, Stasha, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Let me have a sip of coffee and I'm ready to go.
Ocean or mountain?
Oh my gosh. I want the motorhome to go between the two. Ocean and mountain. I shall not be denied.
Best of both worlds. Why not? Right?
Greedy. I am so greedy.
Do you have a fireplace in your home?
Yes, we have two.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah. It's an older home built in 1927, so it didn't have heat or AC when it was built.
All right. Yes, I lived in one of those too.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house and it was in Pennsylvania. We would have to wear, I remember typing before computers, I'm aging myself, but wearing hat, gloves, scarf, jacket, and typing my homework on the typewriter.
That's exactly what it was.
My final question to you. Do you like birds?
I like birds in the wild. I like wild birds. I love wild birds.
I love wild birds too. I don't think I could live with one though.
No, but I am very lucky. I have a neighbor who's very much into natural landscapes and birds and birding, and she tries to help me with my efforts. But we go to her house, and she has all the little birds. She's got all the little, and she takes pictures and posts them on Facebook, and it's absolutely fantastic. And where we live, we're here in Winter Garden. We have a lot of bald eagles that show up. We have a lot of raptors and hawks, and we have all sorts of beautiful little tiny birds. We have two cardinals right now that we're doing a nesting pair, and they're kind of like, really enjoying our garden. We sit out on the back porch with our coffee and watch them. I love birds. I love them.
Spring in Florida is fantastic to watch the birds and their mating rituals.
It truly is. It's like they're just, and they just, when they show up, actually a couple of years ago, one of the hawks had a nest nearby, and the little chicks were like learning to fly in the backyard. And it was like, what's the bird from Snoopy, Tweety Bird, or it would just be like flying along and like fall down. And the eagles were just swooping back and forth in the backyard to protect them. So as the little birds were learning to fly, and then they like fly a little bit farther and pop back down, and you'd see these eagles just keep going back and forth. It was amazing.
Nature in action.
Sorry, not eagles. That was like the big hawks. That was the
osprey
hawks we have. Yeah, yes. Now the ospreys are smaller when there's a bigger hawk. We get the red hawks also.
All right. Well, Stasha Boyd, thank you so much for stopping by.
Allison, thank you so much for having me. It is such a thrill and a joy. I'm so looking forward to the convention. If people are going to be coming back to the convention, I will be there. I am so excited, and thank you. This has been a great fun.
Yes, the Florida Writer Annual Conference. We are so excited to be in person this year. Yay! For anyone wanting information, you can visit the Florida Writer website at floridawriter.org. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Allison Nissen. Allison out. Boom! We're all done.
Yay! That was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stasha Boyd is co-founder and president of Q Media Productions, a full-service digital production company that specializes in audio and video programs for museums, galleries, state and national parks, and cultural institutions. A production professional with over 30 years of experience, including producing, directing, writing, and performance in all aspects of entertainment, ranging from live theater to broadcast and television. For more information about Stasha, visit her website at qmediaproductions.com. Learn, network, and grow at the 20th Annual Florida Writers Conference, October 14th through 17th, 2021, and make your mark with the Florida Writers Association. For more information, visit us at floridawriters.org.